Welcome to Reformed Thinking. Um, Usually, when we talk about a medical diagnosis, there is a pretty clear expectation of precision.
Right. Yeah, you want answers.
Yeah, you break your arm, the x-ray shows that jagged white line, and the doctor just points at it and says, well, there it is. I mean, we are welcoming you to this exclusive deep dive today, and we want to start with that idea of precision.
Because that physical precision is really comforting. We prefer things to be visible. We like them neatly categorized.
Well,
Like if a bone is broken, the solution is straightforward. You put a cast on it.
But then you step into the invisible world of the human soul. You step into our spiritual condition before a holy God, and suddenly that x-ray machine is just shattered.
Yeah, it doesn't work anymore.
No, it doesn't.
Yeah.
We look at our own internal landscape,
Mm-hmm.
and the picture is murky. I mean, we feel anxieties, we experience this intense, insatiable thirst for happiness, and yet we struggle to pinpoint the true source of that ache.
Which brings us to the source material for our deep dive today.
Yes, our mission today is to look at how Jonathan Edwards takes an ancient prophecy from Isaiah, specifically Isaiah chapter 32, verse 3, and diagnoses that specific human condition with surgical precision.
And he doesn't stop at the diagnosis, which is the best part.
Right. We are going to see how he reveals Christ as the complete, all-encompassing provision for the human soul. It's a staggering piece of theology.
It really is. And to set the lens for this conversation, we will approach this text from our shared Protestant Reformed perspective.
Grounded heavily in the Westminster Confession.
Precisely. As we work through Edwards' text, we are going to examine the mechanics of total depravity, penal substitutionary atonement, and the absolute sovereignty of God in salvation.
Because for Edwards, these are not abstract academic concepts to be debated in some dusty classroom.
No, not at all. They are the literal bedrock of human rescue. They are the actual mechanisms that make salvation possible.
I want you, the listener, to really consider your own spiritual thirst right now. Think about your own anxieties. Because we all carry a heavy load of fear, whether we admit it or not.
We do. Every single one of us.
And why should you care about an old sermon from Jonathan Edwards? Because he offers a solution here that addresses the intellect, the emotions, and most crucially, the legal standing of the sinner before a holy God.
And we are going to take our time today.
Yes, we are. We have a ground rule for this dialogue. We are going to establish a conversational rhythm of mutual respect, and we are explicitly ensuring that we never interrupt one another.
Right. We want to let each point breathe. This requires a thorough, unhurried examination of the text so we can truly understand the mechanics of this rescue.
So let's jump in. The text begins with Isaiah chapter 32, verse 3.
And that reads, And a man shall be as a hiding place from the wind and a covert from the tempest, as rivers of water in a dry place, as the shadow of a great rock in a weary land.
The very first thing Edwards points out is the sheer shock of that phrasing. I mean, think about it. In the Old Testament, God is frequently called a rock, or a high tower, or a refuge.
We are very accustomed to that imagery. The Lord is my rock.
Yeah, exactly. Well, spot on. But here, Isaiah specifically prophesies that a man will be this hiding place. That is an astonishing pivot for a Jewish prophet to make.
It really is. And what stands out here is the theological necessity of the incarnation.
Right.
Drawing on Reformed Christology, Edwards is pointing us straight to the fact that the mediator had to be human, to stand in the place of humanity, to fulfill the law that humanity broke, and to bear the punishment that humanity deserved. The Savior could not be an angel.
No, an angel wouldn't work.
And he couldn't simply act from heaven in his divine nature alone either. The law required human obedience and human suffering. Therefore, this man spoken of in Isaiah is the Son of God incarnate.
The divine and human natures united in one person.
Yeah, to accomplish a very specific legal rescue.
Let's think about the mechanics of that for a second. If the law was given to mankind, then mankind must fulfill it. An angel cannot obey on behalf of a human because an angel is not under the same covenantal obligations.
That makes total sense.
Edwards is zeroing in on the concept of federal headship here. Just as Adam acted as the representative for all humanity in the fall, another human had to act as the representative in redemption.
Right. This is the doctrine of the two Adams. The first man brought the storm of God's justice upon the human race.
Yeah, he opened the door to the hurricane.
He did. And the second man, who is the Lord from heaven, provides the shelter from that very storm. And because he is fully God, his sacrifice possesses infinite value. It is capable of absorbing an infinite punishment.
And because he is fully man, that sacrifice is applicable to humanity.
Precisely.
Edwards uses incredibly vivid imagery to illustrate what this rescue looks like. He paints a picture of a person caught in a furious, terrifying storm.
It's a powerful image.
He describes the wind and the rain beating violently, impetuously against the walls and the roof of a shelter. It is just an overwhelming tempest outside.
But the person inside is safe.
Yeah, the person inside that shelter remains totally untouched. They are at peace, they are listening to the thunder roar, but they do not feel a single drop of rain.
That image of the storm is central to everything that follows in this text. The shelter takes the beating, so the person inside does not have to.
But this brings up a practical question for you, the listener. I mean, we all face fears, right?
Absolutely. Disease, financial ruin.
Losing loved ones. So, does Edwards mean Christ is just a shelter from bad days?
Yeah.
Like, is this a promise that if you come to Christ, your earthly circumstances will suddenly become smooth and painless?
Not at all. Edwards makes a massive distinction between temporal fears and eternal fear.
Okay, unpack that.
Well, temporal fears are very real. Sickness, danger, poverty. But Edwards argues that the ultimate terror, the fear that should eclipse all others, is the fear of God's wrath. He says that when a conscience is awakened to its true state, it sees the black clouds of divine justice. And he says those clouds are impregnated with thunder.
Impregnated with thunder. That is a heavy phrase.
It is. The person realizes that the great God is not reconciled to them, that they are guilty, and that God is angry enough to condemn them forever. Temporal storms can hurt the body, but this eternal storm threatens the soul with absolute righteous destruction.
That is a terrifying realization. Edwards says it is a fearful condition to walk around, to eat, drink, and sleep under the impending wrath of God.
Yeah, just going about your day while that storm gathers.
Right, because the greatest threat is not earthly trouble, but divine justice.
Huh.
I mean, if you are standing in a field and a massive tornado is bearing down on you, you do not worry about a mosquito bite on your arm.
No, you're looking at the tornado.
The impending wrath of God is the tornado.
And that awakened conscience is something Edwards dealt with constantly during the Great Awakening.
Oh, for sure.
People were suddenly terrified by the realization of their own guilt. They were not looking for life advice. They were looking for a way to survive the coming judgment.
Realizing that, our conversation has to shift to how this hiding place actually works. I mean, how mechanically and legally does this shelter actually shield the sinner from the wrath of God?
And Edwards does not leave us guessing on this.
No, he doesn't. He provides 8 distinct pillars. 8 reasons why a terrified conscience can find absolute legal and relational safety in Christ. We really need to break down the architecture of this shelter.
Let's do it, because these 8 pillars showcase the bulletproof nature of Reformed justification. Edwards systematically dismantles every possible fear a trembling sinner might have.
So, what is the first pillar?
Let's look at the legal structure first. The first pillar is the voluntary surety. Edwards explains that Christ undertook this specific business before the foundation of the world.
Oh.
He voluntarily put himself in the stead of the sinner. If justice has a claim against the sinner, Christ engaged himself to be responsible for it. It was his own free act.
That speaks directly to the covenant of redemption, right? The agreement made within the Trinity before time began.
Yes, absolutely.
The Son was not drafted into this role against his will. He willingly stepped forward to be the guarantor of the covenant.
That is correct. And that connects directly to the second pillar, which is the Father's appointment. God the Father chose the Son for this task.
Right.
The Father anointed him and sent him into the world for this express purpose.
I want to pause on this because there is a common, almost cartoonish misunderstanding of the Trinity in popular theology today.
Oh, I know exactly what you mean.
Some people picture this angry, vindictive father who just wants to destroy humanity, and a loving, gentle son who steps in to hold the father back. They view the cross as the son absorbing the abuse of an out-of-control deity.
Which is completely false.
Yeah, Edwards completely rejects that. There's no friction in the Trinity. The Father is the one who appointed the shelter. The Father designed the hiding place. He is completely pleased with the Son's undertaking.
That unity of purpose is vital for the conscience. I mean, if the Father and the Son were at odds, you could never be truly safe.
Right, you'd always be wondering who was going to win out.
Yeah. But because the Father appointed the Son, when you hide in the Son, you are acting in accordance with the Father's own design. You are not sneaking past the Father. You are doing what he commanded.
That is so reassuring. And that leads to the third pillar, which deals with the actual execution of the law, the course of justice.
This is the core of penal substitutionary atonement.
Yes, the justice of God and the law of God are unalterable. Every requirement of the law must be fulfilled. I think Edwards says heaven and earth would be destroyed rather than justice failing to take place.
Right. But Edwards points out that justice has its complete, unabated course upon the shelter. Christ bears the stroke of justice. The curse of the law falls fully upon him.
The penalty is not just waved away. God doesn't simply decide to ignore the sin. That would violate his own holy nature.
The punishment has to be executed.
I want to use an analogy to clarify this mechanism, because we often struggle to understand how guilt can actually be transferred legally.
It's a tough concept for modern minds.
Think of it like a massive corporate acquisition. You have a subsidiary company that is engaged in terrible financial mismanagement. They have accrued billions in toxic debt, and they are facing total liquidation. The regulators are literally at the door.
Okay, I'm tracking with you.
Suddenly, a massive, infinitely wealthy parent company steps in and formally acquires a subsidiary. In doing so, the parent company legally assumes all the liabilities of the subsidiary. The regulators still get their money. The fines are paid in full. The law is not bypassed or ignored. The debt is completely satisfied by the parent company out of its own vast reserves.
That's a great way to put it.
So when the regulators leave, the subsidiary is completely safe. Not because the law was broken, but because the law was fulfilled by another.
That illustrates the legal mechanism beautifully. The law leaves fair room for the answering of a surety. The debt is paid, the books are balanced, and justice is satisfied.
The storm hits the structure, and the structure absorbs the impact.
The wrath is exhausted. Which brings us to the fourth pillar, and this shifts from the legal transaction to the value of the sacrifice. This is the honor of God.
Okay, break that down.
Well, a wounded conscience often fears that their sin is so vast and God is so affronted by it that his honor demands their personal destruction. They think, I have insulted the king of the universe. He has to punish me to maintain his dignity.
Yeah, like my sin is too big for the cross.
Right. But Edwards addresses that specific anxiety by arguing that Christ's infinite dignity means his obedience honors God's majesty far more than human sin ever dishonored it.
That is a staggering thought.
Think about who is suffering on the cross. It is not just a good man, it is the Lord of glory. The creator of the cosmos subjects himself to the law.
Yeah.
That act of submission brings more glory and honor to the Father than the eternal punishment of mere creatures ever could. The majesty of the law is vindicated to the highest possible degree.
The value of the payment far exceeds the sum of the debt. It is a massive display of God's majesty that an infinite and eternal person would die to satisfy the law. This completely neutralizes the fear that your specific sins are somehow too great for the cross to handle.
It does. Now, the fifth pillar deals with our relational standing, not just our legal standing. This is the beloved status.
Okay, so we move from the courtroom to the family.
Exactly. Because the believer is united to Christ, they become members of his body. They are, as Edwards says, his flesh and his bones. Therefore, God the Father accepts the believer just as he accepts his own son.
This really requires us to understand the doctrine of union with Christ. When you take shelter in this hiding place, you do not just stand near Christ, you are grafted into him.
Yes, you are one with him.
If God the Father loves Christ infinitely and you are intimately united to Christ, then God accepts you with that same love. There is no jealousy or hesitation on God's part. You are clothed in the perfect righteousness of the Son. The Father looks at you and sees the perfect record of Jesus.
And the sixth pillar is perhaps the most legally reassuring for a doubtful mind. It is the idea of the resurrection as a receipt.
A receipt. I love that language.
Christ was in the hands of justice. He was God's prisoner, held in the grave for the sake of our debt.
I want to spend some real time on this point because the logic here is brilliant. If Christ went to the cross as our substitute, and he entered the prison of death to pay off our immense debt, how do we know the payment was actually sufficient?
Right. How do we know it worked?
Yeah, how do we know the check cleared heaven's bank?
Edwards argues that God raising him from the dead was the equivalent of God opening the prison doors and handing over a public receipt. It was God the Father publicly declaring that the debt was fully settled.
Precisely. If God was not completely satisfied with the payment, he would have kept Christ in the chains of darkness. Justice would have demanded that the prisoner remain in the cell.
Yes, the debt would still be outstanding.
But the very fact that the stone was rolled away and Christ walked out is the empirical proof that the law has absolutely no more claims against him. And by extension, no more claims against those who are united to him. The resurrection is the open testimony that enough has been done.
That legal vindication transitions us to the seventh pillar, the dispensation of safety. God has given Christ all authority in heaven and earth to distribute this salvation. The work of salvation is left in his own hands.
Why is that specific detail comforting to the listener? Why does it matter that Christ is the one distributing the safety?
Because he is the one who died to purchase it.
Yeah.
The person who paid the ultimate price for the medicine is the one in charge of administering it.
That's good.
He will not withhold it from those who come to him because he already endured the agony to secure it. He has absolute jurisdiction over the treasury of grace.
And that leads perfectly into the final eighth pillar, which is Christ's disposition. Even if he has the authority to distribute it, what is his attitude toward dispensing it?
That's a huge question for a troubled conscience.
Yeah. Does he hand out salvation begrudgingly, with a frown, sighing at our constant failures?
Not at all. His heart is full of compassion. Edwards reminds us that Christ delights in gathering sinners like a hen gathers her chicks under her wings.
He wants to save us.
He does. It is a work he exceedingly rejoices in. He is not a reluctant savior. He is drawn to broken people.
Think about the psychological relief of this massive eight-pillar framework. If your salvation depended even a tiny fraction on your own human effort, your anxiety would be constant.
You'd never rest.
You would be forever wondering if you had done enough or felt enough or repented enough. Did I pray hard enough today? Did I mean it enough? You would be trying to build your own little umbrella in the middle of a Category 5 hurricane.
That's a great image. An umbrella in a hurricane.
But because salvation depends entirely on the finished work of Christ, these eight unshakable pillars, the believer can, as Edwards says, stand still and see what the Lord will do.
The storm of wrath is entirely absorbed by the structure of the hiding place. The legal standing is secure. The debt is paid. The receipt is in hand. The Father is pleased. The Son is delighted to save.
So we have established the absolute safety of the shelter. The person inside is completely shielded from the storm of divine justice. But the diagnosis of the human condition does not end there.
No, it doesn't.
Because while the person inside the shelter is safe from the storm, they are still facing a completely different crisis.
Mm-hmm.
They are dying of thirst. Surviving the storm is not enough if you are starving inside the bunker. This forces Edwards to address the next fatal threat.
This brings us to the second clause of Isaiah 32, verse 3, where Christ is described as rivers of water in a dry place.
Rivers of water.
Yes. Edwards uses the incredibly harsh environment of the Arabian desert as a metaphor for the fallen human condition. The storm of wrath was an external threat. This dry place represents an internal crisis.
Let's unpack the psychological insight Edwards brings to this text. He observes that the soul of every single human being necessarily craves happiness. It is an insuperable appetite. It is universal.
He argues that this craving is shared by angels, humans, good people, and bad people alike. It flows directly from the essence of having an intelligent nature.
Right, it's just part of being a rational creature.
Exactly. You cannot create a rational being that does not desire happiness, because the very definition of misery is a state that nature abhors. To have a mind is to seek satisfaction for that mind.
I want to use an analogy to illustrate the sheer scale of this problem. Think of the human soul as a vast, cavernous reservoir, like the Grand Canyon.
Okay, the Grand Canyon.
Now, think of all worldly pleasures, wealth, honor, physical gratification, career success, the perfect family. Trying to fill the soul with those things is like taking a tiny paper cup, dipping it into a puddle, and pouring it into the Grand Canyon.
He doesn't even make a dent.
No. You might feel a momentary splash of relief on the rocks, but the sheer capacity of the reservoir demands something infinitely larger. The vessel is not full, so the craving never ceases.
That perfectly illustrates the Reformed view of the fall, specifically total depravity.
Right, which we need to define carefully.
Yeah. Total depravity does not mean that every person is as thoroughly evil as they can possibly be in their actions. It means that every faculty of the human person is corrupted by the fall, including our appetites.
We want the wrong things.
Mankind is in a wretched state. Edwards compares us to the prodigal son. We were once wealthy in our father's house, where there was an infinite fountain to drink from. But we departed, squandered our wealth, and are now famished, craving the husks meant for swine.
We continuously try to feed our superior spiritual faculties with inferior finite material things. It is a mathematical impossibility. The soul is capable of understanding immense, eternal things, and as the understanding enlarges, the desire enlarges.
A finite object will never satisfy an infinite capacity.
Never. You can acquire all the money in the world, and your soul will still say, is this all there is?
And that is the definition of the dry place. The world offers no water that can sustain the soul. But the provision for this infinite thirst is Christ. He is the ever-flowing river in that arid wasteland.
And Edwards highlights two specific aspects of Christ's provision that finally fill that cavernous reservoir.
The first aspect is his excellency.
Let's talk about his excellency.
Well, Christ's excellency is infinite. Edwards says the rational mind can study it for 10,000 years and never reach the bottom.
Because he is God.
Yes, because Christ is God. His attributes, his wisdom, his beauty, his justice, his grace are without limit. It is the only object adequate to the capacity of human understanding.
That's amazing.
When the soul discovers Christ's glory, it realizes that before it had been pursuing shadows, but now it has found the substance. It had been looking for happiness in a tiny stream that dries up in the summer, and now it has found an eternal ocean.
The second aspect Edwards highlights is his manifested love. It's not just that Christ is excellent in a distant, unapproachable way.
Right, like a beautiful star that you can see but never feel.
Yeah. It is a dying love from a person of infinite dignity.
It is a love that provides a literal bridge back to God the Father. This love gives the soul abundant contentment because it flows from the creator of the universe directly to the individual. The soul knows it is cherished by the highest possible authority.
I want to address the listener directly right now. Look at your own pursuits over the last 5 years. Are you trying to satisfy an infinite spiritual faculty with a finite temporary career?
That is a piercing question.
Are you putting the full weight of your soul's expectation on a finite human relationship? Are you demanding that your spouse or your bank account provide the satisfaction that only an infinite God can provide?
Because they can't. They will break under that weight.
Because until your soul drinks from the river of Christ's infinite excellency, you will remain restless in that parched wilderness. You will keep pouring paper cups into the Grand Canyon and wondering why you are still thirsty.
Once the soul does drink from this river, the immediate threat of death by thirst is resolved. The internal crisis of appetite is met. But the traveler is still in the desert.
Right. The environment hasn't changed.
They have been wandering in this scorching wilderness for so long, they're utterly depleted, their legs are giving out. They need a place to lie down and find relief from the elements.
Which logically moves us to the third clause in Isaiah. Christ is the shadow of a great rock in a weary land. I want you to picture the scorching Arabian sun beating down relentlessly on a traveler.
There are no trees. Just miles of burning sand.
Yeah, sand radiating heat upward and the sun baking them from above. That intense consuming heat represents the terror of an awakened conscience and the crushing heavy load of sin.
Here is where Edwards makes a highly nuanced, distinctly reformed diagnostic distinction regarding the awakened but unregenerate sinner.
This is a crucial point.
He points out that a person in this state who feels the heat of that sun is weary with sin, but they are not necessarily weary of sin.
Wait, I need to push back on this, or at least get you to clarify it, because this sounds like an incredibly harsh standard to hold someone to.
I know it does.
If a person is weeping, terrified of hell, begging God for forgiveness because they feel the crushing weight of their actions, Edwards is saying that is essentially a flawed repentance. Does an awakened sinner not actually hate their sin?
It sounds harsh, but it is a vital diagnostic truth about human nature. According to Edwards, the unregenerate person, even when terrified of hell, still loves the sin itself in their heart.
They still want it.
They still roll it under their tongue as a sweet morsel. Their core affections have not changed. What actually wearies them, what causes them such intense anguish and tears, is the guilt of the sin and the resulting obligation to punishment.
So they are not grieving the fact that they offended a holy God. They are just terrified of the prison sentence.
That is precisely it. They see the undeniable connection between their actions and God's wrath. They hate the hell that is attached to the sin, but they do not hate the filthiness or the rebellion of the sin itself.
Wow.
Their conscience is burdened with legal fear, not with true spiritual mourning. They are weary with the consequences of the heavy load, but if there were no hell, they would happily keep carrying the sin.
That distinction completely alters how we view repentance.
Yeah.
The burden is the terror of the consequences. The sun beating down on them is the heat of the law. So, what is the solution for this exhausted traveler? How does the great rock function?
Well, Christ steps in and first removes the guilt entirely. By taking away the legal obligation to punishment, as we discussed with the 8 pillars, he brings immediate peace to the conscience.
The sun stops beating down.
Right. The legal heat is blocked by the shadow of the rock, but he does not stop there. If he only removed the guilt, the person would just go back to loving the sin without fear.
So he has to change their internal affections.
Yes. As the great physician, he does not just remove the penalty, he actually implants a new principle of spiritual life. This is the doctrine of regeneration.
The rebirth.
He takes a person who is spiritually dead, invigorates their fainting mind, and turns them into a new creature entirely. He changes what they love and what they hate. Now, they are truly weary of the sin itself.
The removal of guilt and the implantation of this new life removes the very foundation of fear and inward tumult. It is like a bird escaping the snare of a fowler.
That's a biblical image, too.
Imagine the sheer panic of the bird caught in the trap, thrashing around, exhausting itself, waiting for the hunter to arrive. Then suddenly the trap is broken by an outside force. The bird is free. The sky is open.
The relief would be massive.
The breathtaking realization of that freedom is what it feels like to sit under the shadow of the great rock. The heavy load of legal guilt and the bondage to a corrupt nature are gone.
But we must be realistic here. This initial rescue, as glorious as it is, does not mean the believer is instantly removed from the desert.
Right, we are still here.
The Christian life continues to be lived in a hostile environment. The world is still broken. This brings us to how the great rock functions for those who are already saved, the saints, who are weary while living in an imperfect state.
Edwards outlines 3 specific ways Christ provides rest for God's people in this world. Let's look at those 3 ways. The first weariness Edwards addresses is being wearied with persecutions.
Edwards traces the enmity between the world and the church all the way back to Cain and Abel. Satan and his followers have always targeted God's people. It is a historical constant.
Yeah, it never stops.
Yet the provision of Christ is so substantial that martyrs historically found an internal calm in him that allowed them to sing praises while enduring horrific physical torments. The outward storm of persecution could not disturb the internal peace granted by the Spirit. The rock stood firm against the hostility of the world.
The second way the believer is weary is being exercised with afflictions. This is the everyday weariness we all know. Bodily weakness, sickness, extreme poverty, the devastating loss of loved ones.
You don't have to be a martyr to feel the exhaustion of living in a fallen world.
No, not at all. Life is heavy.
And in these everyday afflictions, Edwards highlights Christ's experiential knowledge. Christ is not a distant observer looking down from a comfortable balcony. He knows poverty. He had nowhere to lay his head.
He lived it.
He knows physical pain. He knows grief and wept at the tomb of his friend. Furthermore, he promises to be in the stead of all lost relations. He becomes mother, sister, brother to the believer. He's a compassionate high priest who has actually walked the scorching sands of human suffering.
The third weariness is the buffetings of Satan. The enemy loves to cast in groundless scruples, dark clouds, and intense doubts to hinder the Christian.
He is the accuser of the brethren.
Right. He tries to stir up old corruptions, calling out the believer's past sins, and fill the mind with anguish to make them question their standing before God.
But if we look at the absolute sovereignty of Christ, we remember that Christ has all things in heaven and hell under his feet.
He is in control.
Having been tempted and buffeted himself in the wilderness by the devil, he has the absolute authority to restrain Satan at will. He rescues the soul from the roaring lion. He sets a boundary that the enemy cannot cross.
Think about how this alters our entire view of suffering. The rock does not magically teleport the traveler out of the desert. The Arabian desert is still dry, the world is still full of disease and malice, and the sun is still hot.
The elements are still there.
Rather, the rock provides a cool, unmovable shade within the scorching environment. It proves the superiority of internal spiritual joy over external circumstances. You can be in the middle of a weary land, surrounded by affliction, and still find sweet refreshment.
The rest is found in the presence of the rock, not in the absence of the desert.
As we synthesize the massive scope of what God has provided through this singular hiding place, we just have to marvel at the comprehensive nature of the remedy.
It covers every single angle.
For every single deficit caused by the fall, God provided a specific corresponding answer in Christ. It is an overwhelming realization. Edwards lays it out with such precision.
He really does. We were poor, bankrupt before the law. God provided gold tried in the fire. We were naked, stripped of original righteousness. He provided white raiment to cover our shame.
We were blind to our own danger. He provided eye salve so we could see the storm.
We were starving like the prodigal son. God provided a feast of fat things. We were slaves to our own corrupt affections. He provided absolute liberty.
But the final astonishment, the point Edwards makes right at the close of his text, is that God did not simply give us commodities to fix our problems.
Right. He didn't just give us stuff.
He did not hand us a care package from heaven and send us on our way. He gave us Christ. Christ gave himself to be our clothing. He gave his own flesh to be our food.
That is the core of it. We, by our own rebellion, turned ourselves out of house and home, so Christ became our actual habitation and dwelling place. The shelter is a person.
I want you to let that sink in. This theological vision is a complete reorientation of where human safety, satisfaction, and rest actually originate.
It is not found in a change of circumstances.
No. Getting a better job, finding a better location. And it is not found in a set of religious activities either, checking off moral boxes to appease an angry judge. The diagnosis of our disease is total, reaching down to our legal standing and our deepest affections, but the provision of the cure is equally total.
The X-ray might show a shattered, thirsty, terrified soul, but the prescription is not a list of tasks. The prescription is a person.
Which leaves you with a final thought to consider on your own. If Christ is not just the provider of the bread, but the bread itself, if he's not just the builder of the shelter, but the shelter itself, how does that alter what you ask for the next time you pray? Are you asking him for a thing to ease your travel through the desert, or are you asking him for himself? Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into Reformed thinking.